might be all about vehicles, but it's the people behind them who steer the real story. Welcome to Fleet Legends. Things in Fleet never stay still, but one truth always holds up. Nothing beats experience. In this series sponsored by Legend Fleet, we're spotlighting the pros who've seen it all and shaped the industry along the way. These are the trailblazers, the problem solvers, the familiar faces from show floors and interviews who helped build the fleet world that we know today. I'm Lauren Fletcher, Bobbitt's VP of Content and your host for today's conversation. After years of covering fleet trends and tech, I can tell you the most valuable insights always come from the folks who've lived it firsthand. So today, I'm joined by Amy McAdams, a true fleet legend with a story packed with real-world lessons and someone I'm lucky enough to call a good friend in fleet. Amy, let's roll it back to the beginning. Every legend has an origin story. Tell me how you got started.
So I know I've shared this story with many people over drinks, and it is the truth. I was born the daughter of a race car driver. So my fleet experience started when I was 12 months old, sitting in the engine compartment of my dad's 57 Chevy stock car, helping hold wrenches and get dirty from the beginning. So anyway, so that's a little kind of peek into the my history. But truthfully, fleet was something that, everybody always says you don't get into fleet on purpose. Mine was actually a curiosity. I had been an accountant for a long time. My degree's in accounting. I'd been an accountant for many different small mom and pop organizations and then some large organizations. And frankly, it was boring. And I was lucky enough to be immersed in the transition from one FMC to another when I was at ABM Industries. And the corporate fleet manager was leaving, and I threw my hat in the ring, and my boss, who was our interim controller for a little bit, knew who I was, knew how I operated, knew that I was, curious and wouldn't take no for an answer. And so he said, sure, let's give this a try. And, I started out as a baby fleet manager, and, that was kind of it, for me, and I'm hooked, not going anywhere.
Now you're one of our legends, but I do have one question. With all that experience, did you ever learn how to hold the flashlight in the right spot?
No, and I still don't know how to do that.
Years of background, and I still have the same issue.
Exactly.
In the time that you've been in fleet, I mean, a lot has changed, even over the last year or two. What are some of the most significant changes that you've seen in the fleet management industry since you started?
Well, I think the biggest thing has been the electrification initiative. If you think about it, back when the world was horse and buggies and people were they were coming up with these automotive vehicles that were going to run on some other, not a horse, that was a mind-blowing experience for a lot of people back, I would imagine, back then. And so I think back and think this electrification is kind of the same transformation. There weren't gas stations on every corner back then either. There aren't electrification stations on every corner right now. So it's kind of like we're going through this reimagination of what a vehicle is to a lot of people, and understanding that things moved very slow back then. Think about when you were a child, what were the vehicles that were on the road when you were a kid? I already said my dad had a 57 Chevy. There's a big difference between that and a 2025 Chevrolet. So think about electrification in the same way. We're trying to change how we fuel our vehicles, and that's going to be a significant change. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. And understanding that we're still in the infancy stages right now. I know it's been 5, 10, 15 years since electric vehicles started coming out, but we're still new into this, and it's going to take some time. I don't know that in what's remaining of my fleet career, if we'll have figured it all out, you know, so that everybody can electrify. But I think it's a well worth the endeavor to go through the process. We just have to be mindful of who can and who can't electrify.
Creating a better day for the legends of the road with the non-slip van floors, protective interior liners, and full range of work van accessories. Trusted by major OEMs and fleets all across North America and Europe.
And really looking at those lessons, I think, from the past of how long it took the fuel stations to pop up and how that infrastructure had to grow. And I think a part of that too, it's always been fascinating, is we actually have less gas stations now than we did at the peak. And it's because of range. Vehicles didn't need to get gas as often. And so we went in this kind of, roller coaster ride. And we're going to have to do the same thing with EVs as well.
So I think from a fleet manager perspective, I think that, in my opinion, COVID kind of put everybody into a situation where you had to start thinking outside the box. And I think that's a good thing. I think that what you're seeing now is the lessons that you learned during those couple of years are sticking with people, and they remember what it was like. And they remember how they had to the status quo was not the status quo anymore. And, I think that's a good thing. And if you survived COVID as a fleet manager, you've learned some hard lessons, and you probably use those every single day. And anything you have learned, pass on to somebody else, because not everybody has the same experience.
And that's a perfect segue into the fact that we know experience doesn't come easy. Let's get into some of the takeaways that have really stuck with you. What are some of the more important lessons that you've learned in fleet that you believe are really crucial for maybe newer fleet managers to understand?
Wow. I go back to my first fleet conference, and it was a NAFA conference back 15 years ago. And the very first workshop I ever went into. Now, here I am at this conference. I don't know anybody. And I'm in a room with 100 other people who I don't know anybody. And again, I don't know anybody. I don't need the person sitting to my right or to my left. Now I probably know 80% of those people, but I digress. Anyway, we talked about how do you get buy-in from decisions that you need to make. I was looking for suggestions. And the biggest thing that somebody said to me, and it wasn't even during the workshop, it was somebody in the workshop that pulled me aside later. And they said, look, one thing you have to remember as a fleet manager is that your operations, you might report to finance, you might report to procurement, you might report to operations. You touch every part of the organization.
I love it. And this is probably one of my favorite questions. So if we could hop into a virtual time machine for a second and go back in time to when you first started out in fleet, what's one thing you wish you would have known when you first started out?
I wish I would have known how fun it was going to be, because I would have kicked myself for not getting into fleet earlier. That I think is the biggest thing. Look, it's work, it's a career, it's a job at times. Sometimes it's glorified babysitting, but never a day goes by when I don't have some sort of fun doing what it is I do. If you solve a problem for somebody, it's fun. And I think that's the biggest thing. Had I known how rewarding and how fun this was going to be, and the friends I was going to make along the way, I would have so gotten into this so much sooner. There's
a lot of balance in fleet. I think there's the balance of people and processes and technology. And I know you've seen it evolve. Mm-hmm. Thinking about what's worked well, what practices or innovations have you found to really be the most effective in managing a successful fleet?
Telematics. When you didn't know where your vehicles were, or didn't know what condition the engine was in, or didn't know if a driver had possibly had an accident, It was like you were just sitting around waiting for something to happen. Now with telematics, we know where our drivers are operating. We know if there's a problem with their vehicle because the engine diagnostics is going to tell you.
And it really is about keeping them safe at the end of the day more
Yeah.
than anything else. And there's the benefits for, being able to track and see drivers. But I mean, the amount of exoneration that has happened due to camera technology, I think just can't be underestimated.
Sure. And if you've got a driver who might be experiencing a medical event and the camera catches that, that person may not even know that they have an issue. If you can present it to them, it's like, hey, we caught this on camera. You might want to go see if there's something more here.
Yeah, saving lives. I mean, the drivers and the public around them when they're on the road, very incredibly important. So, running a fleet is one thing, but kind of leading a team through ups and downs is an entire different challenge. And I know all of our fleets have a variety of team sizes, whether they're a team of one or have some support. But at the end of the day, you do have your drivers, your tech, and everybody else that's involved in that operation. So, what strategies have you really used to kind of build and lead a successful team?
Oh, wow. So I've had a lot of different types of team people on my team. And I think the first thing I had to do was understand how they work. For me, I'm a hands-on, I want to do something. I want to know how to do everything that I'm expecting my team and my direct reports or my people to do. So that when something goes wrong, I can help troubleshoot. And I think leading by example is the biggest thing. If I can show them, look, I understand what I'm asking you to do, and here's why it's important, and giving the big picture. I found it took me a while to find the kind of the sweet spot. But I have found that when you explain the why behind the ask, it makes the ask easier to swallow, especially if it's a complicated ask or a controversial ask. If I have a someone who is not comfortable looking at camera footage for an accident, okay, well, here's what we're looking for, and explaining what it is what the purpose is before we get to what we need to do. I think it makes it a lot easier to navigate through some of those discussions and some of those challenges. So
really focusing on the human relation side of business too at the end of the day.
That's how I want my boss to treat me and talk to me. And so I feel like I've had some really good bosses in my career, and I try and emulate what they did with me, and so that it seems to work.
So looking just a little bit further down the road, what trends or challenges are you really kind of seeing impacting fleet moving into the future that new or even veteran fleet managers should be preparing for?
I think we need to be cognizant of both positively and negatively. There are pros and cons of everything, but thinking about the mobility, alternate mobility solutions, whether it's rideshare, whether it's driverless vehicles, whether it's drones, whatever. I think all of that is going to have an impact on fleet, the way companies operate their organization and how they utilize a fleet. I can't wait for the day when somebody tells me that, we're going to have a fleet of drones. Okay. I've had boats. I've had an airplane. I've had, a snowcat. I've had lawnmowers and trailers and golf carts. Everything that has wheels, I've had it in my fleet before. I'm waiting for the day when I've got, drones and I'm just going to say I'm also waiting for my hover car. So
The Jetsons made me really, really want flying cars more than I think I'd like to
Exactly.
admit.
They promised.
They really did. Oh man, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your journey and all those insights that you've gained along the way. It's stories like yours that really remind us that Fleet isn't just about vehicles and technology, it's about the people that are driving change. And before we wrap, I want to give you a chance to give the last word. Is there anything you'd like to say to the folks watching or your fellow Fleet friends that have tuned in?
So all I will say is that there have been a lot of people through my career who have been that mentor for a long time, mentor for a short period of time. And I want to thank everybody who's had an impact on me. I could drop some names, but I will refrain from doing that for fear of embarrassing anybody. But I will say that I treasure all of my connections that I have made, and everybody has made me a better fleet manager, and I wouldn't be here without it. And I'm not a legend,
You always are one of my absolute favorite people in Fleet. I am beyond grateful for knowing you. So for everyone else, we hope you're walking away with some solid takeaways, maybe a little inspiration too. If you've got thoughts on the episode, drop them in the comments. If you know someone with a legendary story, tell us who you want to see next. We've got more great conversations on the way, so stay curious, stay connected, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Fleet Legends.